Hey, so I'm putting this here because I am aware that the audio quality isn't the best in this video, but I felt like my thoughts came out so well whenever I was driving, and even though I know that the quality of sound isn't necessarily the best because of everything that you can hear in the background and how the echo of the car itself kind of affects my voice, I feel like the points I make in the video are what matter and less so the quality of the sound. I'm not necessarily going to make this a habit because originally this was meant to be released quite a while ago during the school semester because I was like basically I wanted to release these quick, easy videos that didn't require a whole lot of effort to edit or record, so that way while I'm in school I could still release content. However, shortly after recording the video for this, I went to the hospital for a while, and so by the time I got out, I had to catch up with school, and so by the time that I was ready to work on this video again, school was already done. And so I don't want this work that I've done to go to waste, so I'm going to release it as is with the few edits that I did make, but I'm not going to make a habit of the videos necessarily sounding this way. I might do car recordings in the future, but more than likely I'll probably just do them in a quieter room in the future, so you don't have to worry about this being like a consistent thing that you have to deal with. But other than that, hopefully you can enjoy the video. So it's been a while since I've posted anything. Most of it has to do with school, so I can't really make a big video like I originally planned during the summer. But I recently completed the first season of the Adventure Zone podcast, and I felt like, hey, I want to make a short little video about my thoughts on the series, just briefly, to kind of give people, I guess, an idea of what it's about, if they were maybe heard about it but didn't really know if they wanted to listen to it or not, or if you've never heard of it and maybe like this could persuade you to listen to it. So I realized later that I didn't actually explain what the Adventure Zone podcast is, so I'll do that now. The Adventure Zone podcast is a tabletop role-playing podcast that first started out playing only Dungeons & Dragons, but have since moved on to other games to try and see what game style best fits the storytelling style of podcasting that they want to do. This video covers the first campaign that they did called the Balance Arc. It's made by the McElroys, Justin, Travis, Griffin, and Clint, where Griffin McElroy is the Dungeon Master, and the three main characters of this particular arc are Taco, Merle, and Magnus, with Taco being played by Justin, Merle being played by Clint, and Magnus being played by Travis. It starts out as a standard D&D campaign, but eventually, as time goes on, it becomes more and more unique and quite different from anything that I've ever personally experienced with role-playing games. And for that reason, it's what really kind of pulled me in and what made me interested in the story. I think that's a good enough explanation, so I'll let you get back to my original recording now. So, the way I found out about the podcast was from the Mystery Package Company, or the Mysterious Package Company, where they had like an experience they were advertising for the Adventures, which was based around the Adventure Zone, and I thought it would be kind of interesting like to get some backstory on it, so that way I could get all the little hidden jokes within it once I finally got the experience. And in about a month, I managed to binge through all 69 plus episodes, and it was quite the ride. It was very emotional, and I never expected to be impacted in such a way by it. I felt joy, sadness, and even fear at times. Like, it was really well done, and I'm incredibly impressed with it and so glad that I listened to it. That being said, there were a few issues with it. Mainly, they had an issue with tone in some of the earlier arcs. At first, like they would sometimes they make it was very joke heavy, and they even admit that like when people try recommending this podcast on Twitter, they would say things about how like it's very emotional and how they got so invested. But then when people try listening to it, like they get the first few episodes and it's hardly anything like the way that it was described to them, and that can be a big turnoff to some people sometimes, because even though it's very funny and entertaining in the way it's done, it's not really shown to be a very emotional or engaging story from the get-go.
I see folks recommending this show to other folks on Twitter all the time, and they say, like, you gotta listen to this show, like, the story goes to some places, and I see a lot of people say, like, it emotionally affects them, and like, oh man, I cried so much during this episode, and then I see somebody say, oh, I'm gonna start listening to the Adventure Zone, and then like, a day later, it's like, I just hit this point in the Adventure Zone where one of them murdered somebody and asked why they got a boner. Like, are you sure this is the same one?
And also, at the beginning, it was based off of the one of the starter books for the D&D campaign, and because of this, at first, Griffin McElroy, the dungeon master, didn't have a story planned out at the beginning, but by halfway through the first arc, Here There Be Gerblins, he finally started creating his own story, and by the end of that arc, he finally had a good broad idea of where he wanted to take the story. But because of that, it does mean that some of the first few episodes end up having a few continuity errors later on down the road. Nothing that really impacts the series in a major way, per se, but they are still there, and it's worth mentioning.
Now, this is my question, though, Griffin, and this is something I've always kind of been curious about. What was your, like, plan when you started? Like, did you plan to just hop from like pre-written campaign to pre-written campaign, or what was the? I don't think
I had a plan. I think because when we did the first episode, it was under the guise of you were on paternity leave, and so like this is a filler, and we didn't even know this was going to be a podcast. So when we started, my mind was in this mode of like, all right, well, let's just get an episode done so Juice can have a break. And I think that's been a detriment, I think, to the show, because it's tough, like, going back and listening to that first arc, and like some of it I've had to kind of try to work into the bigger campaign, but like I really didn't have that bigger campaign until after that first arc was over, and I think that did us maybe a little bit of a disservice, because it did take me a while to start dropping hints, right? Like,
I did mention, like, with the tone issue, there was one moment in particular for me personally that really ruined a scene with their humor. It was the last episode of the Pedals to the Metal arc, and it's an incredibly emotional scene, and it's like the second time in the series that music actually starts getting played within the episode, and it's in a very emotional moment, and they have me in the palm of their hands, and then Justin, who plays the character of Taco, decides to make a joke, and it takes so much of the seriousness away from the moment that it went from being one of my all-time favorite moments of the series thus far to being my least favorite moment in the entirety of the Adventure Zone thus far that I've listened to. And that's not to say that the scene itself, if you remove the humor, it's all great, it's all well played out, but the humor takes away from so much of the emotion of the scene that it just kills it for me, and it takes me from being very sad and kind of almost on the verge of tears a little bit to just being kind of pretty mad and just kind of like very annoyed that they didn't really seem to take the moment seriously like the rest of the audience probably was doing. Hey, so I'm recording this in post because I feel like I didn't word one of my statements very well. I said that they didn't really understand how much the series meant to the audience, and that they thought that they were only really there for the humor. That is not entirely true, I would say. Like, after going back and listening to some of the Adventure Zone zones, they definitely had much more of a focus on humor, but they were very much aware of this series story that Griffin was writing, and that people were invested in it. I think it was just that as the show got more popular, they started taking more and more ownership of the fact that people are here for more than just one reason, and that if they want to, I guess, keep their viewers entertained or to give them the best show that they can, they had to step up their game and be better actors in terms of a serious, story-driven sense rather than just a humor one.
And there was a period where I just made him dumb. Does everybody remember the period where I made him like wicked stupid?
Yeah, he was just a trash bag there for a bit.
And I did that because I didn't think he was funny enough. So I thought it would be funny to make him dumb. And it wasn't until I tried to do that I started bumping up against like, oh, wait a minute. Like, that's not right. Like, that's not who this character is, and that's not who the person is. And so that made me feel ownership.
It wasn't until like basically right after Pedals to the Metal and a lot during the next arc, Crystal Kingdom, that they really came to realize just how important this was to people. And because of that, their performances got so much better. It was still just as funny as before, lots of great humor, though maybe not as crass in a lot of ways. But to add on to the humor of the series, they had some great character moments that were very serious, full of so much emotion, and it went from just being a big joke fest to being a joke fest with a heart, in a way. And to me, that is probably the greatest part about the Adventure Zone. He was able to go from something that was incredibly simple and not really complex whatsoever to being a very nuanced series with a lot of depth and character to it. So I would say that the Adventure Zone is definitely something that you should listen to. Personally, for me, like during my commutes, I started getting bored of listening to the same music on the radio and on my iPod over and over again. And what I wanted to do, and I actually just started listening to podcasts with pretend friends who created by Continue and Kevin Cole, which was my first, and that was also a tabletop role-playing podcast, and that's a large part of why I got interested in this podcast as well. And for me, it makes commuting to school and so much more fun and entertaining and much more engaging, to the point where I actually want my commutes to take as long as possible. And if you're looking for something to maybe help spice up your commute as well, or if you just want something to sit at home and listen to, the Adventure Zone is definitely something that you should listen to. And since school is still going, honestly, I might do a video on Pretend Friends as well, now that I've mentioned it. I mean, it'd be a nice quick video as well, where I can get my thoughts out and hopefully provide the creators with something to improve upon, I suppose. Since the next season of the Space Kings arc will be coming back in probably not too long, I imagine, considering how far season 2 has gone. And yeah, I think that's it. This is pretty unscripted. I just kind of want to get my thoughts out there. Get it real quick because I don't exactly have a whole lot of time to make together a very polished video, I guess you could say, with my schedule. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and hopefully I've convinced you to maybe at least try listening to the Adventure Zone. And that's all. Take care.